If you want to see your name at the beginning of all of our videos, as well as see exclusive content here on the homestead, please feel free to join our Patreon. Memberships start off at just $1 a month. And as always, thank you for your support.
Someone else answered your question in the comments, but I think this is a really important question that you posed and could really help people who are just breeding rabbits, be it meat mutts or purebreds, to sustain their family. My personal answer to this question is yes. You should be breeding your rabbit towards a certain conformation. And if you look up on Google a commercial type rabbit, that's kind of what you want to go towards. And that's because that kind of conformation and body type equates to the most meat yield per pound of rabbit. On top of focusing on conformation when you're just breeding for meat, I also recommend keeping track of grow out rates, litter sizes, meat to bone ratio, and adult size in general. Those kind of goals are so important to have, even if you are raising meat for yourself. So again, I feel like nuance is needed here, and I'm going to try to speak on this from a standpoint of you aren't really getting my flexions in dialect when it comes to speaking on the subject, because you can't really get that through text. And I'm not skirting the question. You asked if a dog and a rabbit should require the same quality of care, and I answered to you that they require different care. And they require different care because they're different animals. That doesn't mean it should be sub-quality, it means it should be the quality determined for that species of animal. A rabbit is a rabbit is a rabbit. Appropriate care is appropriate care. And when we look for studies when it comes to the AG colleges, and the most recent PhD articles, we find that the best care is normally on cages, meaning wire floors. Now, if you're raising an animal on a solid bottom floor, then go right ahead, that's completely fine. Do what works for your farm. But with wire bottom cages, we see a lower mortality rate. We see lower rates of sickness. We see lower levels of cortisol. They don't have the extra problems that we see when we're adding extra environmental factors. They get quality care. Just because you don't like it doesn't mean it isn't quality. My pet rabbit has the same kind of care that my meat rabbits do, because I have both. The only difference is one is inside the house and the others aren't. And the thing is I think where you're getting stuck is the idea of pet versus food. A lot of people have a really bad habit of spoiling their animals and not meeting basic biological needs. So for instance, you'll see a lot of people within the pet community argue that rabbits need things like salads. They need constant hay. Well, when we do this, what we see is GI stasis, we see diarrhea, we see rabbits getting sick. They're not meeting their protein needs, so they're slowly starving to death and losing condition. Whereas when you feed a pelleted diet, they meet all the requirements because it's a complete pellet. Again, we're seeing people not meeting basic needs. And this could be both pet and meat, whichever one you want to argue. Another point is wire flooring. We hear this constantly. Wire flooring causes arthritis, it causes sore hocks. It doesn't. The arthritis study has been thrown out now for over 5 years. It's been debunked. The sore hocks argument is based on the fact of poor genetics. 14-16 gauge smooth wire does not cause sore hocks. If we're talking about spacing, the spacing is fine. In fact, in the most recent study, there's actually 6 that have come out now in 2020. We actually see a rise in cortisol levels as our cages get larger compared to our moderate-sized cages. So again, these arguments take nuance and a lot of good faith. This is Daisy. Daisy is my sister's pet, who will be staying on the farm for the next 2 or 3 years, chilling until she's done with college. But until then, I am borrowing her as a brood doe with my sister's permission. And we are going to use this lovely girl in our blue-eyed white program. So there are some things I really like about this doe, some things I don't really like. For our blue-eyed white lines, she actually has a pretty good shoulder. I would say it's a step down from her father's strawberries, but it's not horrible. She has a pretty nice high point, and she's pretty full through this loin. I want to see a bit more weight as she gets a bit older, but overall, a nice balance. What I really like is her fur and not the color. Her fur is not soft. It's dense and it's thick. It'll be really nice to offset the fur of our current Vienna carrying buck, who has a very soft, thin fur. So hopefully Daisy will be having some blue-eyed white babies in the next 3 or 4 months. The answer to this question is yes. I keep track of everything, including how ugly this transition fur is on these babies as we're getting into winter. You guys are so fluffy yet ugly in your coats. But I keep track of a lot of unnecessary things for most breeders. The big things you want to keep track of are pedigree, meaning who's mom, who's dad, who's related to who. You want to keep track of your moms, if they have babies, how many do they have, how many have died of natural causes, what are the grow out rates, what did they produce, did you like that pairing in general? Just some of the basic things. You also want to keep track of weights and common health and care procedures. So for us, that's things like nail trimming and weighing the rabbits monthly, and if they have lost or gained weight and how much feed we're feeding them. I also keep track of coefficients, so who's related to who and by how much. I keep track of my line breeding and what I want to do with it in the future. I have a bit of a guessing when it comes to color genetics on babies and proven adults. I keep track of who has won at what show, have they received any awards for that, what have the judges said. And then I also keep track of pros and cons of each animal for my breeding records. There is probably more that I am missing because I don't have my notebook right with me. But I keep track of a lot of things. This is Butcher VBB. He was the only silver fox buck out of our litter of Vanessa and Barbosa. And in this video, he is about 3 months old. He was the smallest in our litter of 5 and is always about half the size of his sisters. His type is also pretty sucky overall. He just has a very hollow loin and is very pinched and has a very long shoulder. With that being said, it's super disappointing because his fur was gorgeous. But with the 3 bucks we currently have, he wasn't really worth keeping. We butchered him out with a hang weight of about 4 pounds, and all of the fat that he was missing from the outside of his body was internal. He had a lot of fat around his kidneys. It was ridiculous. But I absolutely loved his fur type. But overall, he wasn't the quality that I wanted to keep in a buck for our program. I do not shear any of my rabbits, and that is because I have fur types that don't require it. So I have rabbits with Rex fur, flyback fur, and standing fur. None that are wool fur rabbits. A lot of people that you see shearing on this app have Angoras, which I really like Angoras. I think they're super awesome. It's just something that I wouldn't get into just because I don't have the time to do all of that grooming and shearing. And then also, I am horrible at knitting and crocheting, so I wouldn't know what to do with all of that fiber. When it comes to breeding stock, I'm looking for does and bucks that come as close as possible to the standard of perfection. So, dependent on the breed, depends on what I want. Beyond that, when I'm looking at keeping grow outs, I'm looking for babies within the litter that are reaching the top 10% for growth rate. I want them to be stout and healthy. And then I'm also looking for very docile animals. Showed off my quail housing not too long ago in a previous video, but taking care of these guys is pretty simple. I feed and water them about twice a day. Now, if I see that their water is low, I'll top it off. You want to make sure that they have food and water at all times because these guys like to scalp each other. If not, they get bored and hangry. I can relate. but I just use a Game Bird crumble, and for my adult females, they get a calcium supplement, like a powder. And then I keep them on pine shavings, and I clean the pine shavings out once a week. We are about a day away from cleaning their pine shavings, and this kind of gives you an idea of how dirty it gets in a week. Some people also keep their quail on wire so that the poop can just fall through. If you're going to do that, I would suggest doing some kind of coated wire to avoid bumblefoot. But our quail lay year-round. We have a few that are looking kind of ugly because they're molting. But we keep lights on them during the winter so that they continue to lay. We just ensure that they have 12 to 16 hours of some kind of light, be that natural or artificial, and they'll continue for us. I will switch out my roosters about every 6 months to help with fertility reasons. And then the females get switched out every year to year and a half. Because they lay so early in comparison to chickens, you can switch them out quicker as well, and it's not as long of a wait. This is my little German pastel rooster. Isn't he adorable? I love him. But these guys are really easy. They're relatively quiet. They get about 1 square foot per bird. I do a little more than that on the higher end of females just to help with squabbling. So for instance, if I'm only supposed to have 20 birds in here, I might do 25, with those extras being female. And again, that just helps my male to female ratio to avoid fights in here. And they are kind of idiots because they will literally squeeze into one corner while they have all of this open space over here. But we hatch babies year round. There are very little differences when it comes to hatching and moving out. You just want to take it a little bit slower so that the babies can get acclimated to the cold. And just remember that these guys are a bit suicidal and like to kill themselves. But other than that, I love raising quail. They're so much fun. And they're just beautiful. Look at all these color variations that I have. And then I have my Psycho Silver Pen with my broody hen. She just hates me, but I think she is gorgeous, and I absolutely adore her, so I'll just wait for her to be done getting broody, and if she continues, I'll just pull her out. And these are a few of my jumbo whites, and I have a jumbo rooster in here that is a jumbo wild type. But yeah, lots of pretty birds. When you are first getting into rabbits and you are looking at dispatch options, I highly encourage going onto YouTube and checking them all out and kind of getting comfortable with the idea of which one would fit you best. Because there are a lot of different options, from choke chain to airsoft to cervical dislocation. And there are a lot more, to be honest. Those are just the few that are popping into my mind. My favorite way to dispatch is cervical dislocation via the broomstick method, in that you are pulling the body weight up. There is another version of cervical dislocation called the hopper popper, in which you are pulling down, but I find that to be much more difficult. In that you kind of have to put the rabbit's body up into the device before pulling down, and it leaves a lot open to you getting hurt and kind of botching it. So I prefer the broomstick method. Very easy, very quick, and for the most part, very quiet. Now, if you have a problem with arthritis or you don't have that great of upper body strength, I would look at the airsoft method, or maybe like a BB or a pellet. But again, it just kind of depends on what you are comfortable with. Watch videos on YouTube, do your research, and if possible, find a butcher class near you where you can practice on animals that aren't yours.